Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear brothers and sisters and viewers of IQRA TV, welcome to another edition of Real Talk. I hope that every one of you who is watching now this program has had a wonderful Eid, celebrating this amazing event that we have in our calendar, of the Islamic calendar, celebrating this amazing event with your families and friends, and every one of you have had the most pleasant time imaginable. And I hope that all that revival of Islamic spirit has been built up into you over the last few weeks as well, and may Allah sustain it for you forever. Thank you for joining us today. We've had this break for a couple of weeks for the Eid period. Today I'm glad to be back on this TV program and in front of you and coming into your homes. And I have a very, very special guest today, especially after the Eid that we've celebrated. A person that everybody will be extremely familiar with. She's not somebody who's unknown. In fact, she's more famous than most other people that I've interviewed on my program. As soon as the camera pans on her, you'll know who it is. And I'm really glad that out of a very busy schedule, she has given us the opportunity to come here today so we can talk to her. Brothers and sisters, I give you Naz Shah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, the Member of Parliament for Bradford West. Naz, it's really nice to see you here again. Thank you for coming in. And before I say anything else, I found out when I got here that you actually just been for Hajj and come back. Many, many congratulations. May Allah accept all your ibadahs that you've done over there. And I'll talk to you about how that experience was. But thank you for coming. How are you?
Assalamu alaikum to your viewers. Absolute pleasure to be here, and I mean to what you've just said. Yes, I've just come back from Hajj, and belated Eid Mubarak to all your viewers. What an amazing experience, alhamdulillah. So yeah.
So first time you went there?
First time ever.
Have you been to Umrah before that?
No, I'd not been to Umrah.
So this is a completely first experience?
Absolutely.
Just like the way I did it as well, yeah.
Very sudden. I had no plans.
Right.
I literally, the Monday before, I travelled on the Friday, the 2nd, and then the Monday before that, I was in London, as you are, working away. Yeah, I got a text message, do you want to do this? And I thought, yeah, why not? And then by Wednesday I had my visa, and the following, I came back to Bradford, and I had to do all my packing and prepping. And then I was left Bradford on the Thursday.
Oh, right. That was a very quick, sort of short, sharp decision to do and go.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The best way for me. It was very, very last minute.
Right.
And yeah, alhamdulillah.
And so when you got there, did you go to Makkah first or Medina first?
Medina.
You went to Medina first, did you? Right, okay. So some people do it the other way around. I mean, what emotions came into your being, what feelings sort of regenerated within you or grew up in you? Because I remember when I went to Makkah first, and as we were traveling into the city of Makkah and you could see the Haram Sharif from a distance, I mean, the tears just started to flow. Absolutely. I could not control them. I didn't want to control them, but they just started to flow, and that's how it affected me. Did it have the same effect on you?
My sister and I stopped trying to look at each other, because every time we looked at each other, it was very similar. You just got overwhelmed with emotion. I think for me, it was an opportunity to reflect hugely on my own life journey, and the fact that I was called, when I said to people, it's very last minute, you've got Allah's invitation.
Definitely, yes.
And when you're invited by your Maker, and that in itself is so overwhelming, thinking, yeah Allah, I was thinking maybe in a few years' time I'd think about it, I'd try and get an Umrah in between to get a feel of things, and then for it to happen as it did, very overwhelming. And for somebody coming from where I've come from, and how I've, a spectacular, as against the odds as it is for me to be in Parliament as an MP for Bradford West, it's, for me to be at Hajj in the holiest of cities, both of them, it was absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah. And then obviously you went from Medina to Makkah.
Yeah,
and how was that journey, and how was when you went into the Kaaba for the first time? When you see...
It's undescribable, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you've experienced it, you know what it is, because it's just, the first time your gaze is lowered, and the first time you lift your gaze, and there it is, and all your life, this is Kaaba that you've been reading your Salah to, you've been facing, you understand it, it's a core of who you are. And to be there amongst the Muslims of the world, and everybody just doing the same as what you're doing, and the same, the same, it is just amazing. It's indescribable. It's a personal experience, I think, which is different for every individual.
Yeah, everybody comes out with their own little personal sort of revival, sort of strength, whatever it is that you want to call it. And do you feel like, now that you've experienced it, do you feel like, so I'd love to do this again at some stage?
Yes, so I want to take my children to Umrah.
Right.
I'm thinking about that now, about taking them next year for them to experience it, because I've come back and I've told them all about it, and I feel I think that's important for me to do now. And I think, yes, for me it is very, very important. And I think on a personal level, one of the things that I said when I was there, I was interviewed when I was there, and I said, look, you know, against the backdrop of what I do as a Muslim MP of Bradford West, of a shadow minister for women and equalities, and I talk a lot about Islamophobia, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it. The truth is, here I'm in a world where I receive lots of abuse. I'm in a world where I'm trying to challenge the narrative, the otherizing of Muslims, and here I'm in a city which is every person around me is a fellow Muslim.
Muslim, yes.
And they're from all corners of the world, you know, different backgrounds, different races, but we're all there for the same purpose. And the kind of feeling that generates inside you of unity, there is no class boundary, there is no culture boundary, there is no you're all Muslims, and that's the core of what it is. It's really overwhelming, and it's beautiful to have that feeling of love and emotion and unity with people, from millions of people in the same place as you.
Yeah, obviously, you know, I mean, it normalizes, so it makes you feel more humble when you're there with other fellow Muslim brothers and sisters, because whatever position you may be in the world outside, there you're all equal, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And it sort of, you know, it brings everybody down to the same level.
Absolutely.
You know, and it makes you realize that, you know, no matter what you fight for, what you strive for, at the end of the day, there's only one God, and that's the God you're going to be returning to, and that's Allah. Right? I mean, I'm really pleased that, you know, you've had the opportunity to go there, and you know, you had maybe how long were you there for? 3 weeks, 4 weeks?
No, just less than 2 weeks.
Was it? Oh, less than 2 weeks.
I travelled out on a Friday, and a fortnight later on a Friday.
All right,
so
you had one of those, because usually people go for about 3 or 4 weeks, you know.
Yeah.
So you obviously, with your busy schedule, it's probably very difficult. You know.
No, 2 weeks. 2 weeks was about right, because it's recess and there's lots of work in the constituency, you know, to do. So yes, and the children are off on holiday.
So these are the 2 weeks where you had no social media activity.
Well, until
harassing you, were they?
No. So until the 5 days of Hajj, when I was in Mina, that was different. So my share of my social media, but there was with Kashmir. You know, there was as I went to Mina, as I arrived in Mina, there was a whole backdrop of the article being revoked and the kind of the lockdown in Kashmir. So I think for me it was really I was there for a purpose, to focus on my ibadat, and that was what I did. But I must admit, before I got there en route to very, very struggled, because lots of my du'as.
Well, I want to talk to you about that. Yeah, I mean, you know, that is something that every Muslim around the whole world has been concerned about, and you know, your letter that you've written to the Foreign Office obviously has gone round on social media, and I think you've done a fantastic job. I'm not sure whether you've had a response to that letter or not.
No.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you you've not had a response to that letter, which doesn't surprise me with the recess, you know. But yeah, so I'll come back to your experience around the Hajj in a while. But obviously you are the Member of Parliament for Bradford West. You have been here, I think you were here about 2 years ago, just over a year ago. And I know you've been really busy in between that time. I mean, how do you see in those time period things change? You had Brexit. In your opinion, you know, being in Parliament, sitting there and obviously doing constituency work, what are some of the key issues that you feel?
I think Brexit opened up a whole different face of our country in terms of the people. There was and I'm really, really clear about it. I do not believe that every person who voted for Brexit and voted to leave is racist. That's not the case, or homophobic or xenophobic. That's not the case. People had very, very valid reasons to vote because they had, and that is the beauty about a democracy. And I think, but what I have seen is Brexit open up a sea of divisions, and it's reared a very, very ugly head, has been allowed to rear itself of those divisions in our country. And that narrative has been, we have issues which are really, really polarised right now. And for me, as a Muslim Member of Parliament, who, you know, when I went into Parliament, I was a member of parliament, as British, I happen to be Muslim. I feel like I've become the Muslim MP because I've done so much work on Islamophobia, and because of my position as a Shadow Equalities Minister, and Islamophobia is part of that portfolio. So I think for me, lots has changed. It's certainly not what I expected when I was elected in 2015.
Right.
2016, after the referendum, things have changed. The last, and you knew Jo Cox, when Brexit happened, only days before we lost her. And so we have huge divisions. I think we have huge challenges.
Do you think those divisions can be healed?
I'm an ever optimist, right. And when I look at people who have gone before us, the real great leaders, the Mandelas of this world, the Martin Luther Kings of this world, when they were faced with this kind of division in their societies, and Mandela said it was much easier. We were born, we have to learn to hate. Love comes naturally to us. And I think those are the kind of things that we have to hold on to, that inspire us. But also, if you look at, for me, having just come back from Hajj, my own experiences as a Muslim, when I draw back to my passions, which are leadership, we have the examples of our Prophet, peace be upon him, of how he conducted himself, and how he treated minorities, and how under his leadership minorities were strengthened, relationships were strengthened. So I take a lot of comfort from that, but that does not leave me in a position where I'm naive to the realities of the far right, the rise of the far right. It doesn't comfort me that we have, we were talking about Prevent only yesterday. I was at a conference call because I'm part of a national race and religion policing roundtable about the whole review of Prevent, and we've had Lord Carlisle appointed to that whilst I was at Hajj. And that's a very worrying thing for me, because this government has appointed somebody who has already endorsed Prevent, and Prevent, if there's anything that where it doesn't sit right with, is with the Muslim community.
Definitely, yes.
And then if we've got this rise of a far right, and we've got this 50% kind of referral rate now to channel and to Prevent Muslims and from the far right, that's not because they've got it right with the Muslims. It's because there's a huge rise in the far right, and they took their eye off the ball on that one.
Do you feel that the government? I mean, I sat on the government's Anti-Muslim Hate Crime Advisory Group. I'm still the deputy chair of the government's Hate Crime Advisory Group, the national body, and we feel that the government has not still understood or recognized the importance or the seriousness of the issues of the far right and what it poses to this country and our nation. Do you feel similarly from sitting on across the benches that do you feel that the government is aware, willing and able to control and do something about the far right now than they were than before?
I think now, I'd like to think they get it. Am I convinced that they do? I'm not sure I do, because if you have a government which is, as far as I'm concerned, institutionally Islamophobic, for you to get the issue of the rise of far right post Christchurch, post Pittsburgh, post all of these things that have happened, and El Paso and what's happening in the world, then I'm not convinced that they've got it, they get it. I really am not convinced. Because you've got to remember, Iqbal, only a few years ago, I think it was last year when we had the original conversation with the minister asking for a definition of Islamophobia, they said they did not need a definition of Islamophobia. So that was only a year ago, and then we had Christchurch. Now all of a sudden we need a definition for Islamophobia. And the all-party parliamentary group, we did a huge piece of work last year. Alhamdulillah, the definition that was the largest piece of work that unified the Muslims from absolutely across the board, in endorsing that definition, that Islamophobia is a type of racism. It is rooted in racism. It is a type of racism that targets Muslimness and perceived Muslimness. That does not, contrary to what some right-wing critics would think, that actually it turns Islam into a race. It does not turn Islam into a race.
That's always been one of the difficulties.
Yes.
People have wondered why certain characteristics are protected, and whereas Jewish communities, there's one homogeneous community, the Muslims are, form from many different backgrounds and cultures. So that's always been one of the difficulties. So, you're trying to overcome that. But, I know from my experience as well that there are certain Muslim groups who are not comfortable with the definition that you have come up with. And what do you say to them in the absence of anything else? Okay, fine, you've got a definition there, But even the government's now asking the Anti-Muslim Hate Crime Advisory Group that I used to sit on to look at that whole area again, because that is something that is vital. And do you feel that the government is asking for you to get involved in that, or are they doing it on their own?
I think, look, and I've got to, for the APPG, I'm really, really pleased what the APPG has done.
The APPG is the All-Party Parliamentary Group, yeah, for our viewers.
For British Muslims.
Yes.
What it has done is it started a conversation.
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
It has got it on the map. It has got it in the mainstream conversations. The three things that really happened for Muslims in terms of government have been the coining of the term Islamophobia from the Runnymede Trust, which was over 21 years ago.
Which was first launched in Bradford, by the way.
And then we had the Baroness Varsi's infamous dining table speech, Islamophobia is past the dining table test, and that was in 2011.
Yes.
And then we fast forward to 2018, and we have a definition that is the most widely consulted, widely endorsed by the most wide section of a mainstream Muslim community, up and down 850 organisations, and that number keeps growing, and over 80 academics. And in terms of what would I say to those that have concerns about the definition, the concerns have been two. One is about the use of word racism. That does it turn Islam into a race? No, it doesn't. The academic thinking is when we think about racism, we think about it in the context of discrimination. So if you have a name, in the 80s, 70s it was, if you had a name which wasn't English sounding, you wouldn't get a job. If you walked through the door and you wasn't Caucasian, white Caucasian, you would get treated differently. You wouldn't get a job you wouldn't get a job interview, you wouldn't get a house, you wouldn't get etc. That was our understanding of racism. That is the same concept that is being applied to Muslims right now. So if you are a Muslim, if you're visibly a Muslim, you will experience discrimination, and it is structural. So that addresses the issue of racism, or the word race. It's our understanding as society. Racism isn't understood as a race like it used to be when the the term was, as colour. It is rooted in racism. It's a type of racism, as in discrimination. The idea of Muslimness and perceived Muslimness. Now, I've used the term Muslimness for many years, and the academics who talked about it, and we had massive discussion on it, lots of debate on this issue. Indeed, I remember Dominic Grieve and Anna Subri and I and Saeed Awarsi in West Region having this conversation about the word Muslimness, and we came to an agreement. We started off with anti-Muslim discrimination when we set off on the inquiry. We came to the word Islamophobia, we came back to that. And that is the idea of, we had a Sikh man who was killed in America because he thought he was a Muslim. So we had a Sikh guy who had his turban pulled off outside Parliament because they thought he was a Muslim. So it's a perception of Muslim. And then we've had a study from Birmingham which says that men have been attacked for wearing beards who are non-Muslims, but just because they wear a beard, they're perceived to be Muslims. So when people ask, is this definition about protecting Muslims or is it about protecting everybody? It's about protecting everybody who would be the victim of an Islamophobic attack.
Or maybe perceived to be Muslim.
Yes. Well, so if you have on Visit Your Mosque Day from MCB a English female, white female, and this is the example I gave to the leader of a council, if you decided to wear a headscarf and you went into a mosque and you adhered to the traditional clothing, and there was somebody who was an Islamophobe who wanted to attack on that day, attacked you, he's not going to stop and ask you whether you're actually a Muslim or not.
Yes.
I've yet to meet a bigot who does that. So who asks whether you are. He or she, that Islamophobic attack, the victim will be a victim because of a perception that they were Muslims. So that addresses that issue. As for the conversation has started. It's a conversation that was needed.
I agree.
A year earlier, the minister said we didn't want a definition of Islamophobia. The fact that the government have got to a position where they accept they need a definition, I'm disappointed that they didn't accept the all-party parliamentary groups because they have, we've gone out to consultation. It's got the widest buy-in, the political party buy-in, the Labour Party, the SNP, even the Scottish Conservative Party, the Plaid Cymru, everybody, the Green Party have all adopted it. The Labour Party have adopted it. So for me, there is this issue about, there's an issue about...
Because some local authorities, are adopting designing and adopting their own definitions,
and that's absolutely fine.
Which vary slightly from the definition that the APPG.
We need a definition.
Are you okay with that?
Look, we have a definition.
Right.
The majority of the Muslim community has adopted the, Bradford has had its own definition.
Yes.
And people have their own definition, and that's a matter for them. And that's absolutely fine. It's about recognising the fact is that the all-party parliamentary group have gone out, done this piece of consultation. We have started that conversation.
And I think congratulations to you.
Yes.
I think you're actually, it's a watershed moment. There's no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Right. The term actually appearing in Hansard, for example, which is the parliamentary record, in itself, I think, is a major sort of achievement. So, I mean, the next stage of this, obviously, I mean, we're not sure what's going to happen with the government at the moment, whether there's an election. But if the Labour Party came into power, obviously you'd be the Minister for Women and Equalities, inshallah, let's hope. Would the Labour Party want to go back and have another look at the definition, or would they say, we've got this definition, over 800 organisations have accepted it, the majority of people seem to be fine with it, so they'll adopt it as not just on Labour, I mean the Labour Party itself has adopted the definition, but as a government policy. Is that how you see it panning out?
Well, I see it, I absolutely see it panning out, just as we did with the IHRA definition. Right. The government have adopted the IHRA definition, so I really don't get the difference between them adopting the IHRA definition and not adopting this one.
The IHRA is the
anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism one, yeah.
So the international definition of anti-Semitism. So I really, really do feel that in fact, that would be the right direction of travel. That really, really all now depends on what the current government is doing with this review. So they have appointed Qari Asam from Leeds, and I have an amount of respect for Qari Asam, but that does not mean I won't hold him to account and ask him the question.
A dear friend of mine as well, just like
so
yours.
I will, so I'm hopeful, and I'm looking to him for leadership, because he will speak to the Muslim community, and no doubt. I have those expectations that he will. Well,
I'm sure, and I hope Qari Asim is listening and watching this program. I know he's a very busy man. Qari and I sat on the anti-Muslim hate crime advisory group for over 7 years together, and I know the government have appointed him, and good luck to him. I think he'll do a good job, as long as the government listen to what he says.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Even if he has the best will in the world, and he endorses or whatever his recommendations are, at the end of the day, if he goes back. And it was telling that Theresa May is one of the last appointments that she made before leaving was Qari Asam's appointment, as opposed to leaving it in the hands of Boris Johnson. So that was very interesting.
And he could turn it around anyway.
Yes.
We're getting close to our first break. I mean, obviously we can carry on with this conversation, but I want to also come back on the current issue that affects the Muslim community. That's vexing all of them, and that's Kashmir and your letter to the Foreign Secretary, the Foreign Office, and also how the communities at local levels are responding to it and what we need to be doing. So we'll come back to that. Inshallah, I mean, so far, everything I've heard from Naz Shah, a Member of Parliament from Bradford West, has been really illuminating. I think it's been encouraging about the work that she has been doing. May Allah give her even more power. Inshallah, we'll come back very soon. Enjoy your break, and we'll see you soon at the end of this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.